We're back with our sixth socially distant studio visit, a series we're doing remotely for Hall Walls. It's become a little bit of a pandemic diary as we talk every couple days to an artist that has exhibited at Hall Walls in the past in different geographies, see how they're doing, see how their neighborhoods are faring and how people around them are doing. And today we're speaking to Vandana Jain, who is in Brooklyn, New York. She showed at Hall Walls back in March and April of 2018 with the solo exhibition Artisanal Capitalism. The image behind me, which I'm chroma keying in and out of, is from a digital animation called Fortune that was featured in that show. And my first question, as always, and the most important question is, how are you right now? How are you doing?
Oh, I think it's crazy. Some days are great and other days are just a little, all the anxiety kind of creeps back in and you start thinking about what's going to happen in a month, what's going to happen in a year. So it depends, some days are like totally like, it's almost like this isn't happening and you kind of like get on your own wave and you keep doing you can kind of get into the ideas that you're having and really just make the most of having this kind of quarantine situation. So yeah, it's a balance. I never know what I'm going to get in the morning.
What neighborhood are you in specifically?
In Crown Heights in Brooklyn.
So I was speaking to somebody else that lives in Brooklyn and who has a small backyard, and she noted that, I asked her what the atmosphere was like in her neighborhood, and she said that it's really quiet, and the only thing she really hears are birds or sirens, which painted a very vivid picture of the situation. So what is it like in Crown Heights?
It's exactly the same, except occasionally there are helicopters. We heard and saw a Chinook the other day, a military helicopter, which is really strange. I usually don't see a lot of those. It's really tough. I mean, the sirens can be quite low, but once you start looking for them, you start realizing they're always there. So we're almost like, my husband and I are like now trying to see if we can find moments where we don't hear sirens. We
Yes.
also we're on the second floor, so it's not our backyard, but on our block, there's a giant backyard full of everyone's backyards. And then on the other end is a school. So we often hear birds, which is always just such a treat about where I live. There are a lot of trees and a lot of birds. But yeah.
And are people in Crown Heights observing social distancing? Or, are you going out to the market, or what's that like?
It's a mix, you have like the joggers and the dog walkers and, definitely people also need to get out. The weather's getting better. For the most part, everyone's pretty respectful, maintaining a distance. Like we like move into the street if we're walking or, there's kind of that relationship happening. Most people are wearing masks now of some sort. So yeah, I feel like it's been okay.
Now, your work, a lot of your work, most of your work has explored and dealt with issues around capitalism, around corporatism, around corporate structures, around, as you can see behind me, the signifiers of capitalism. And this is a moment where capitalism has come under particular fire for being a bit of a failed moment in its reality. Have you reflected much on that, being someone that's looked into it a lot over the years?
I mean, I think it's just when this first started happening, I think the first thing that a lot of us thought was like, oh my God, like here's finally this moment, this moment of change, of potentially radical change. Almost seeing it as some sort of great leveler or thinking about how it's affecting so many people. There's no real escaping it. But then as the days and weeks have worn on, I think what's sort of also been happening is seeing how some people can escape it. I mean, it's still, you start to see how wealth can still get you better access to healthcare, especially in this country, to testing. If you're a celebrity, you're getting tested, and all these other people, it's almost impossible to get a test. So in a way, I think what it's doing is laying bare the system of capitalism is the only reality that we can exist in. And if we're lucky, I do hope we can carve out some more socialized aspects that can allow people to exist without needing to like work at Amazon and expose themselves to a pandemic because they're considered an essential worker. But at this point, I feel like it's still, we're just seeing it happen. We're seeing it unfold. There's a lot that's happening. Like I was really heartened when like the GE workers went on strike to push for making ventilators. So again, this is sort of like the workers saying, no, like we need to be doing this. We can do this. We have the capacity to do this. Why are we not being trained to do this? Or when Amazon workers are striking to say they need better conditions. They need to have less people on the floor. They need to, you know, so I do feel like there's a lot of resistance right now that we're able to see.
In addition to being an artist, you're also a textile designer, and I was kind of curious if, as with other artists, have you started making masks?
Yes, we did. I was doing a lot of research on what to use. So I have like a few masks that I just wear when I'm just going out for walking that are a bit more breathable, just more cloth, handkerchiefs, very light level. But then I got some auto body shop towels. They're like shop towels. They're just made out of like this poly fabric, and they're supposedly better at filtering the air. So that's usually what I use when I go into a store, which is kind of like once every 2 weeks. Like we're really trying to limit our exposure and also just limit our contact with people. So we're trying to go 2 weeks. We were going every week, but we have to go to the laundromat. There's still things that we need to do. So I found a really great YouTube video, which I posted on my Facebook, which is like just a pleated mask that you can make with like staplers. And if you have these towels, or you can use paper towels, or you can sew it if you want, and make it out of cloth.
And are you finding any, I mean, we've all got more time than we thought we would have this month. Are you doing any artwork? Are you working on anything in particular?
Yeah, just before this started, I was invited to be part of like an artist sort of making work for each other kind of art box. So it's the whole premise is you get a whole bunch of artists together, they make a unique edition, and then every artist gets one of each. And the theme is flags, which I've also sort of worked with flags and sort of what the American flag signifies and what it means, and just national flags, international groupings, and how they're represented by the countries that are involved. But it's been so interesting because as this has been happening, the way I was approaching my ideas has really shifted. First of all, my access to materials is much more limited than it was, say, at the beginning of March. So I'm thinking differently about how I'm going to produce something which needs to be produced in June. And I'm not quite sure, like, if all of my, like, for instance, if I wanted to get screen printed cloth, can I make that happen between now and then? Whereas before I could just order it from Spoonflower, have a couple of tests, and it would be ready in time, and I could quilt it if I wanted. Or so again, it's like I've sort of had to shift my language and kind of like really go back to thinking like, what can I make? But then secondly, also I've been thinking a lot about, well, what do I want to say? Like, what if I can if I was to design so I've been thinking a lot about like looking at flags. I started off looking at flags of various autonomous and secessionist movements from around the world, and they definitely run the gamut. I mean, it's the Sami people, and I believe Norway and Finland and Palestine and Tibet, but then you also have like Cascadia, like the Oregon and like the secessionist movement there. So it's a mix of like left and right wing movements, and some of the politics get very particular to contexts that I'm not necessarily familiar with. But I just started, really thinking about what flags mean and what they could mean. And I guess in this moment, I started thinking, going back to what my first initial hopeful thought was when this happened, was like, oh, now maybe we can really make the shift that we need to make. to actually save our planet, right? I mean, maybe that's too much. Save our existence on this planet, maybe is the way that, but I think this is like almost a precursor to the kinds of pressures that climate change would bring about. And so I guess I'm trying to figure out how to make a flag that sort of unites us all under one banner, where maybe we're thinking about each other, we're thinking about the environment, we're also thinking about our economy. And I don't know if you're familiar with this idea called the triple bottom line. I think it's been around now for about 20 years, but it was a way to kind of bring these things into balance and say it's not just economics, it's not just your GDP that determines how successful you are or how you're functioning. You also have to take into account how happy your workers are. You also have to think, what is your environmental impact? How much have you relied on natural resources, which seem free, but they're not free because they're not renewable. So you have to take in the cost of growing that again. And these are all the sort of hidden costs that we never look at in capitalism. We just sort of take things, and we never think about having to put them back. So I guess now I'm trying to get all of this into like into a flag that could be like, I don't know. So I have a lot, it's a great time for thinking.
I was thinking back to your show and the sculptures that were made from single-use plastic bags. And of course, that ban went into effect a few months ago. And I don't know if this is a weird way to think about it, but I go to the grocery store now and everyone's bringing their cloth bag, which
Yeah.
at this moment looks to me like everybody carrying their own little bacteria trap.
I know.
And the single-use plastic bag could have been the hygienic hero of the moment and stuck with it.
It's so strange, right? Because they're telling you have to disinfect your bags, and I just sort of stuff them back in and pretend it, just wash my hands 3 times and pretend I'm all good now. But yeah, we've really changed the way. It's going to be so strange when we are able to re-enter some aspects of our life. Like I watch movies and I'm very confused that people are standing so close to one another, or that they just hugged,
Yeah.
And it's so interesting because we're so adaptable, and we kind of we fall into we can fall into line so easily, and then we can also kind of forget so easily. So
Well, I mean, as an artist, you appreciate like a place like Hall Walls. We're program based. We want people to show up for exhibitions, for film screenings. We want people to have a sense of community. We always say having too many people show up is never a problem. That's a problem
yeah.
we want to have. So we're kind of in this moment where we're uncertain, even when people will be allowed to congregate again, how willing or interested there will be, whether there will be people that will continue to kind of keep their distance, and whether there will be people that are just hungry to get back to what we thought of as normal.
I mean, I have to say I'm really missing the texture that events bring. Even like events like gallery shows, but also just going to a restaurant with a friend. It's those are the things that are sort of markers in my life that I've relied on to know what day is like which, and when the weekends, and all of these things, when the beginning of March was, or the beginning of April. And now that I don't have that, it's really amazing. I'm starting to lose track of what day it is, or
Yeah.
if it was last night that I had that Skype call, or 2 nights ago. And it's really interesting that time has started to collapse in that way. So
Well, I was having a conversation with my doctor on a video chat, and I was saying, I'm doing okay, but sometimes I'm finding that the days go by weirdly fast. And
very fast.
she said, yeah, that's not uncommon in this sort of situation for like time to sort of compress in a weird way. And you think that time would drag on, but there are days where I just think, wow, the day's over now, even though I didn't do anything.
I think when they talk about how as you get older the years slip by, they always talk about the fact that your kind of doing the same things more and more. You have less new experiences. So like times of great change in your life or upheaval slow down. And again, I think it's because I'm doing like maybe a handful, like, I don't know, half a dozen things in a week, you know? So it's like every day is like every other day. It's like, oh, I did this for 3 hours, and then I did this for 5 hours, and then I did this for 2 hours, and then boop, you know? So,
My my last question that I like to ask is, no matter whether it's a big thing or a little thing, when things return to some semblance of normal, what's the first thing you want to do?
it's the oddest thing. I actually want to be in a store and I want to go browsing. Like I want to be around other physical objects I can touch and like, you know, I mean, I get a little bit of that at the grocery store, but the grocery store is kind of a gauntlet. Like you go in with a mask, you're buying so much stuff, you're kind of beleaguered by the time you get out of it. Like it's really, I just kind of want that pleasure of like, you know, being a shopper, of just going into a store and like, do I want this or this? Like, it's so strange. It's not who I am, but I think
It's a great answer, though, because it really depicts a sense of the normal, of what so many of us know as being ordinary, uh, and something that we would take for granted as not being that important, browsing in a store. But underlying it, it does signify something about how we live our lives and how we interact with the world.
yeah,
So thank you so much for taking some time out today to talk. It's really great to see you again.
yeah.
Um,
Thanks for hosting this series. It's been really fun.
yeah, I mean, it's just nice to check in with people and see what they're doing. Everybody's doing something different. Everybody's thinking something different, even though we are, in a sense, all experiencing the same thing. We're doing it from our own little worlds, and it's nice to check in on those. So thanks again. I hope that you get into a store very, very soon.
Thanks, John.
All right. Bye bye.
Bye.